You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What is up, soccer fans, and welcome to episode 2 of Soccer Talks with Aly Trost Martin. Very exciting times in the soccer world right now because the U.S. men's national team are on to the round of 16 in the 2022 World Cup. They defeated Iran 1-0 in their last group stage match. That is exactly what they needed. They needed a win to advance. They did that. And if you were enjoying the game with us down at the Power and Light District for our watch party with Sporting Kansas City and KCP&L down there, well, then you know just how freaking awesome the turnout and crowd in Kansas City has been. They showed it just like every other shot on the Fox soccer broadcasts, and it has just been so fun. The first watch party that I ever got a chance to do here in Kansas City, they've just gotten like bigger and bigger each year. And they've been going on beyond or before I even got to Kansas City. But I, in 2019, was talking with Nate Bucati about joining sports radio 810 at the time. And he was like, well, why don't you come on down and help out with this Women's World Cup watch party? So that was like the first taste that I got. You know, I kind of had already seen what KC sports fans and soccer fans were all about, but that was like, I remember just such a memorable experience and really like showed just how passionate KC soccer fans were. And to now be a part of it, like in this way, you know, a few years later, and just all that is like wrapped up in this World Cup, what it means with Kansas City being a host city in 2026, like just so exciting. So if all of that to say, if you haven't been a part of it and you want to be a part of it, then you need to come down to Power and Light this Saturday, 9 a.m., the U.S. men's national team taking on the Netherlands. Win or go home. That is what is on the line now until the end of this thing in the next few weeks. So that is what they've got to do. We'll be there. Gates open, I think, at like 7:30. It's going to be an early kick, 9 a.m. So go online, get your tickets, and see us down there because it's going to be a lot of fun, and I cannot wait. That said, we are going to keep talking some World Cup on Soccer Talks because that is what is going on right now. So I am so happy to have my good friend Jordan Angeli on the show this week. And without further ado, let's jump into our interview because I plan to talk to her for like maybe 15, 20 minutes. And I think we went for almost an hour. So here is Jordan Angeli on all things USMNT and World Cup. But first, want to shout out our friends at Emprise Bank. There's more options to do banking now more than ever. So who you work with is more important than how close they are to your home. Emprise has digital banking that meets you where you are, on your phone, on your computer, or even your smartwatch. A trusted partner is at your fingertips. I'm so excited to now welcome Jordan Angeli on to the show. Jordan is not just an incredible analyst, reporter, host. She's done a little bit of everything covering Major League Soccer. You probably heard her on the call for the Columbus Crew Games last couple of years on Bally Sports. She's also done a ton of work covering the NWSL, a league that she formerly played in as a pro, doing work for them as an analyst, a panelist, and a sideline reporter. She's done it all. She is also just an incredible person. Jordan Angeli, welcome onto the show.
Thanks so much, Aly. I feel like I need to bring you with me wherever I go, and you can just announce me to people because that was so sweet. I loved all of that. Thanks for such a warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here. I have the lack of Christmas decorations up, but I feel like at least my room's kind of clean, which is a positive.
Yeah. Oh, don't look at the rest of my apartment right now because I'm trying to keep like what's good in frame. There's piles of laundry everywhere.
We don't tell people the behind the scenes stuff. They don't even know.
It's hard when your studio is at home. Okay. The people don't need to see what goes on. I used to like, going out to the stadium, you once we got out of like everything being virtual and being like, all right, didn't have to pick up. I just had to get ready. I didn't have to pick up and make my home living situation look presentable. as well. But
Yeah.
everything kind of just goes to the wayside when the World Cup is happening, because in addition to the US men's national team, there are so many incredible games. I feel like this has been such an exciting World Cup that you almost don't want to miss any of the action. So I want to start there with you. Where have you been enjoying these games? What is your World Cup schedule look like now that, all of the league play is either over or paused? I mean, all focus is on the World Cup. So what does that look like for you?
It feels a little weird because my cadence over the last few years has been, and as has everybody's in Major League Soccer or NWSL in the United States, is this is a time where we have a little bit of rest and time away from the game. So it's been interesting for me because I moved back to Colorado from Columbus, Ohio, where I was working for the Crew. And so I've been moving, and I have been spending a lot of time with my family. My sister lives here, and she has 2 little kids. So I've been kind of soaking up time with them. And unfortunately, they don't nap during the World Cup games. So I am missing out on more games that I probably would have normally, but I'm still getting enough in and getting my fix. And, I haven't caught every game, which in the World Cups past, I probably have. And if I were actually, if we were working these games, and I know you've been doing some work in Kansas City at some killer watch parties. But
it has been a lot of fun, but
yeah, I haven't seen all the games,
physically
but
taxing.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've seen enough, and it has been so wild. I think every year we get to this point during World Cup cycles, and in the midst of the World Cup, we're like, this is the craziest one yet. This is the craziest one yet. But with some of the results after yesterday and today, and Australia just went through today. Australia, they barely made the World Cup through a playoff. And here they are going through, and it is mayhem in Australia. I just saw some videos there before we popped on. And it's really cool, especially cool for me to see Milos Degenek, a part of that Australian team, who is a member of the Columbus Crew and MLS, and a really just wise and insightful guy. A lot of poise and presence with him, and perspective, I think, would be one thing. And to see him celebrating, kissing the camera, helping his team move forward. There have been so many moments like that this is why we love this. And this is why we tell everybody, not just during the World Cup, but leading up to it in the 4 years in between, we're like, just wait for the World Cup. You're going to love it. And this is why we love it. It is just madness.
It is. And the stories are just incredible. You mentioned Australia going through, and I mean, whether it's an upset or, a Cinderella story type situation, it's so cool to see all of these different players, these teams, fans with so much history, just kind of all coming together for this one thing. But, you mentioned how important that lead up to the World Cup is. It's something that only happens every 4 years. And so if you miss out on qualifying for a World Cup, it does set you back. And US fans know that very well after missing out on the 2018 World Cup. That made qualifying so much more stressful. There were so many question marks. I mean, there was really a kind of turning of the page with all of these now young players who have never played in a World Cup except for DeAndre Edlin, to carry the U.S. through in their hopes of making it to the finals and lifting this thing, and maybe being that fun underdog, kind of young, scrappy team story to, I don't know, just ease the hearts and minds of American sports fans. When you look back on the 4 years leading up to this World Cup, are you surprised at all, now that the group stage is done, the U.S. have advanced, are you surprised at all that this was kind of what they were able to achieve up to this point?
I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I'm actually pretty in awe of this group because of some of the things that you had mentioned. This is a really young team, second youngest team at the World Cup. You just mentioned the one player who had experience coming into this World Cup, DeAndre Edlin, has not touched the field. And probably we would have thought that he would have been the substitute over Shaq Moore in some of these games, and Shaq Moore has come on. I was pretty shocked that wasn't DeAndre Edlin over Shaq Moore. So that one player hasn't seen the field. So you have this really young group. You have the expectations and the heartbreak that these young players have had to carry while also carrying the inexperience that they have. Yeah, they play at big clubs, but now you're putting this expectation on them and the heartbreak from the previous cycle all on these really young players. And this is where I'm in awe, is that they've been able to shoulder that. They've been able to say, yeah, we don't want that to happen again. And we're going to do everything in our power. And it hasn't been pretty. There's been a lot of questions, and maybe more questions throughout World Cup qualifying than other teams would have to answer because of the previous cycle. But I feel like every single time they're hit with a test, they show up. And last year was a good example. They show up and they win the Gold Cup and they win the Nations League. Like was that what it's called? The Nations League? Now I can't remember what that was called. The one at the beginning of the summer where they played Mexico. They beat Mexico twice, but they win both of those. Yes.
Also, like, the names are just,
I know.
We need to talk about the names. They're all the same name, just like with one slight difference.
And that's why I'm second guessing myself on that. But anyways, they won both of those last year and they showed up. And I think that's what we have seen even in this World Cup, is this team has the ability to block out all the chatter. It has the ability to do what maybe you wouldn't expect for them to do, is to have that presence of experience with, even though they don't have it. So I've been very in awe of them in general, of how they have poise and they've handled themselves, and they've been able to do something that everybody expects them to do, which is really difficult to do that when everyone expects you to do it. Like if it was go into the knockout rounds, or this would have all been a failure to a lot of people. I don't really think that way, because I feel like there has been so much growth. But that was the expectation that they were shouldering, and they came out and they figured out a way, and it wasn't always pretty and they weren't perfect games, but it doesn't matter when you're at the World Cup. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be enough to advance and get yourself into the knockout rounds. And here they are.
Absolutely. Well, and just yes, it was the Nations League. You had me second guessing as well. I was like,
okay, good.
There's nations champions, like, cups, this, but yes, no, I agree with you. And it's interesting because it's, the biggest talking point around this team is their age and their lack of experience when it comes to a World Cup and, accomplishments with the national team. But as you mentioned, a lot of these guys do have experience playing in top leagues in the world. They've had to step up and rise to the occasion a number of times, even if it hasn't been within this setting. And it's interesting because I almost wonder if that lack of experience is almost their greatest strength at times, because they don't know what it is that they have to fear, and kind of get that sense at times, and just hearing them talk and the maturity, the poise, like they're going into this thing with confidence because they don't know how else to act. They just lean back on, what experience they do have. And for a lot of them, that's a heck of a lot.
Yeah, it can be an attribute for sure, a real benefit to not have the experience and to be green in any situation, right? And just to go out there and be yourself. And I think we're seeing that from a number of players, their ability to go out there and be themselves and to rise to the occasion and to show the world how good Americans are. And we've been seeing that over the last, not that Americans didn't play in big leagues for a long time, but we're seeing it in droves now, in big numbers. And so now we're getting to see not only Tyler Adams be just so good for Leeds, but to be one of the best midfielders we've seen in the World Cup this year is an American midfielder. And I'm not even saying that because I'm American. I truly feel like he has been that good at helping this team not give up difficult area, like not give up space in the middle of the field, to stop transition moments, to really mitigate opportunities for the other team. He's been outstanding. And I think that's where the difference is going to come, is now people are going to realize, okay, yeah, we've heard the Americans are good, but now we're really seeing it. And there's a lot of players that I feel like have really stepped up.
It really does feel like we're on the cusp of this like insanely exciting time in American soccer, because in 2026, it'll be here in North America, the US, to have gotten this far. I mean, if they go past, Netherlands on Saturday. They've already achieved more than most other U.S. national teams in the World Cup. So that alone would be just a massive accomplishment. And I don't think while a lot of people wanted them to get out of the group or expected them to get out of the group, I don't think many have expected them to go super far in this thing. But, I want to go back to something that you said earlier, and that is, in the World Cup, it doesn't really matter how you get the results that you need. What matters is that you advance and you get the job done at the end of the day. And there's been a lot of criticism of Greg Berhalter and his game management, or lack thereof, particularly in the second halves of these group stage matches. What has been your assessment of the way that the U.S. have kind of come out in these games? And in all three, I think started really strong, but, little anxiety and stressful moments to close them out. And, of course, not maybe scoring as many goals to put themselves in positions to make them a little less stressful.
It's been interesting. And I would say I've had criticisms too. And I think we've all asked questions, and Greg Berhalter is not there sitting there saying, I've done everything right. If everything I've heard of him and know of him is true, he is trying to figure out what is going on as far as how his team is playing in the first half and the second half, and how it's so significantly different. I think the first game against Wales, for me, I was really confused as to, with the substitutions that came on at halftime and the change in how Wales was attacking, going a lot more direct. I was surprised that the United States didn't switch some of their tactics as to how they were pressing and how they were recovering second balls. And I hope that was something that was learned in that process. And all you can do at this time in this stage is hope that the preparation that you've done to get to this moment has helped you, and then learn from these tests that you're having every 4 days. Okay, did we get better from that? Are we able to adjust tactics when the opponent switches things at halftime? Okay, well, we need to see a little bit more of that. I would say in the England game, I didn't feel that until the substitutions for England came on, because I felt like the team played really well through about 70 minutes. England made a couple of subs, and that changed things. I felt like the counter sub should have come a little bit sooner just to stop their momentum. And then in this last game, the United States, they have played some of the best soccer we've seen them play in the first half. I would say against Wales, I would say against England, and then in this last game as well against Iran, they played some really good football. But I wasn't expecting them up a goal to play the same way that they did in the first half to the second half, because they scored that goal right before halftime. Now you come into the second half knowing you need a win. They had an opportunity to score a second goal. And I'm saying, don't change everything and don't try not to score that second goal. Of course, you have to score that second goal, because if the opponent gets one, they go on. I think the big question there, and I actually think the United States handled being up a goal late in the game really well. I thought their defensive line of pressure in their it was a 5-4-1, their lines of pressure in their defensive half of the field. I thought they covered the channels really well, minus one time when Musa, who was exhausted, lost his footing, couldn't really get to the ball, ended up fouling. And that was the header that glanced wide. And I almost thought I was going to pass out, because I thought they caught the tying goal there. And then they bring in Zimmerman. I think that really is a great lesson, because now there's going to be opportunities, but they can shore up a game and they can defend in this block and kill out some dying moments of the game. So I don't think I'm as hard on this last game as I was on the previous games, because I do feel like the tactics and the shift in some of the way that they were sitting defensively actually very much helped them. And they looked really comfortable with Acosta and Zimmerman and Moore on there. But you're not going to have that, the Netherlands are going to score that goal if they get that opportunity. So those are the little tweaks that they have to be just that much better in the next game. But there's always going to be criticisms, and people taking the head coach job of a national team know that. Tata Martino knows that, and he now doesn't have a job anymore.
Barely, by the way. I mean,
yeah.
Mexico, just needed one more goal in that game, and
fair
play, baby.
Right.
That's
So
for anyone listening who doesn't know, like that is what cut Mexico out of the World Cup, out of advancing in the World Cup was yellow card accumulation. That is,
yeah.
another one of the tiebreakers that kind of factors in. So
So
play
there's
fair.
always going to be criticism. I think he can handle it. I think, at this point, our job is to talk about it. His job is to figure out how to change it that works for his team. And nobody knows that team better than him. And yeah, we'll see. This is what the fun part of the tournament happens. And I think sometimes where Americans might have a little bit of an advantage, because this is like, we play this style all the time. We play knockout rounds. And when you're thinking about MLS Cup playoffs, when you're thinking about growing up in youth tournaments, like you're playing knockout games to get to a final. And, a lot of foreign leagues are not necessarily structured that way when it comes to how they crown their winner. So maybe there's a little advantage to having the United States mentality in these knockout rounds.
Yeah, a young, brash group who knows how to,
Yeah.
play with a lot on the line every single time you play anything, right? Like
Mhm.
as a kid growing up, everything was,
Yeah.
there was always an elimination of some sort.
Right.
But when you look at it, just another, I think, area that a lot of people are wanting to play manager a little bit is when it comes to what those substitutions are when they are made. Like you mentioned, being a little surprised. I was as well to see Shaq Moore get the nod going in over DeAndre Yedlin. Another player that a lot of people have had a lot of question marks around is Gio Reyna. Why is Gio Reyna not made it in the game? This has now, of course, led to U.S. Soccer Twitter, which is always a very lively place, to kind of
a good word for it.
speculate a ton. And I mean, I've even seen screen grabs of like Gio Reyna walking into the team hotel, like everyone's celebrating, he's not. And it's
that was a weird video though.
That was a weird video. I'm not going to deny, but my hope in like seeing all of this and reading all of this is that like, okay, if it's an issue on like US Soccer Twitter, whatever, we're all gonna like, have our questions and have our opinions, but like, is this a problem in the locker room? And I do think that, whether that video means something or not, he could have just gotten like, a crappy text from a girl that he likes or something getting off the bus. And I don't know. I mean, you just don't know. Like, who am I to say? I'm not, I'm not there. But like, I also think though that, the disconnect between him and Berhalter when it comes to like his injury status, like all of these things are just like, and then all of that with the fact that he's not really getting any minutes, it's just like making you wonder what's going on there. Obviously you don't know, I don't know, but what is your kind of thought around like Gio Reyna? And if he's not being utilized, is there any reason beyond like, hey, maybe he's just hurt? Like what did you make of all of this?
I think there's a variety of different ways. We don't know. Like, is there an injury there that we don't know about because he is so injury prone? And maybe that's why he's disappointed that he got to this place and he is injured. I could understand that, but this is where I find that video really hit me in a way where I'm questioning things, because if you're on a team, it's different than if you're an individual. And tennis players can show emotions differently because they're playing an individual sport than a person who's on a team. In going to the World Cup, you can have all the hopes you want to play a lot of minutes. But I saw DeAndre Yedlin coming into the hotel, having a good time, high-fiving the people that were there to support the United States of America. And he was embracing it. He hasn't played a minute. Gio's played more than that. And I think that's where I'm a little, it just makes me think, okay, what is going on here? And who's the person in his ear? Because if I was the person in his ear, I would say, Gio, you are an amazing player. You are very young. This could be the first of many World Cups for you. But also, if you're not a good teammate, it could be the last of many World Cups for you. And I think that's where I don't know what the situation is, but if it is, we've heard rumors that there is something happening that could be stopping him from playing when it comes to his attitude. Does he deserve to play? Like, the kid is unreal. Absolutely. But if it doesn't fit the coach's system, it doesn't fit the coach's system. And you can't take away from your team at this moment. You have to be the best teammate you can be. And sometimes that means you're not going to be on the field. And that's a hard lesson to learn, especially when you've been a superstar. And so, and to learn it at on the world stage in the biggest tournament. And he never, with the injuries he has, he might think, I don't know, will I get to go to many World Cups? And now I'm not playing.
And I do understand, though, too, like, being young, and it's so hard to have like that perspective at that time, especially if you do have some of that anxiety around, like, hey, I've had these injuries. I've maybe been a letdown in some respects because I haven't been able to play every available minute due to injuries and stuff like that.
And it's hard because when you're that young, your brain isn't fully developed. So something happens and you think it's like the end of the world. That literally your brain cannot see that there is so much more to come because of brain development. And that's just a scientific fact about how our brains are developed. They don't fully develop until we're like 28 years old. And so we don't get that type of reasoning until later in our life. And he's not that old yet. So, I think that there's some difficulties there. But if I were someone close to him right now, he still has an opportunity to be a big part of this team, whether it's through, I don't know if he is injured, I don't know. But the way that video just set me into a spiral of it feels like it's something more than that, and something that is, he doesn't even look happy to be on a team advancing to the next round in the World Cup. Do you know there are players that didn't make this team that would love to be there? And I understand you can be as competitive as you want, and that is why you're on this team. But it's difficult because you also have to put the team first.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 100%. It was really fun talking with Benny Feilhaber, who, of course, is an MLS veteran, played in the U.S. Men's national team in World Cup. And he said, sometimes some of the coaches' decisions when naming the roster, of course, you have confidence that every guy that you name could go on to the field and do what they need to help the team win on the field. But there are also players that are pure, like, glue guy, locker room type decisions who are going to be really good for the off the field, which is, as you know, having played the game, like, so important to the success of a team is having a strong locker room. And that starts with good leaders, good personalities who can also, help when someone is kind of maybe dropping off a little bit or struggling with some of that to lift everybody up so that everyone's on the same page, because, that's just, that chemistry is irreplaceable. But Jordan, you mentioned injuries, and Christian Pulisic puts his body on the line, suffers a pelvic contusion, we've now learned, scoring the game-winning goal for the United States. But that did not stop him from celebrating. He went full Kris Jenner.
Oh my gosh, your tweet cracked me up.
He was absolutely, like, capturing all the content, hyping up the guys, getting back to the hotel, sending Snapchats.
I probably would have gone with, like,
the
Mean Girls mom, with the video camera, but teach their own.
Revisionist history. Like, maybe I'll make this is a Jordan Angeli version of this tweet. But I, like, absolutely love that, because I think that, like, clip, more than anything else I've seen of Christian Pulisic ever, like, to me, just embodied how much he, like, loves this team and loves this out. It was just, like, the most pure thing you've ever seen. So for that and the Gio Reyna thing to be, like, in the same video is kind of like, you were on a roller coaster a little bit. But
I think that's one of my favorite parts about big games in various sports is, like, the pure human element that comes out when you win, the emotions, the crying, the, like, grown men who are, like, these tough guys who have such an image are crying and jumping around like little kids, like, we put on these fronts for so much, but, like, for so much of our lives. But then when something actually truly happens that affects your life, like you go back to like human primal response. And that's what I feel like Christian was doing, is just like, I'm so happy. These are my guys. Like, it was just so joyful in that moment, with him capturing it was like an upscale tunnel, the old tunnels what you used to run through at soccer, at the hotel. So that was cool.
I've watched it way too many times just because, it's like pure happiness, smiles, like the best, just like little moment, like peek into like how this team is like feeling after that. Jedi Robinson breaking down into tears in the locker room. Like there's so many, like there are almost too many like clips from all, like I could spend hours just kind of scrolling through all of it. But Christian Pulisic's injury, of course, is something that is going to be talked about a lot now leading up to this game against the Netherlands. What's his availability looking like? He, of course, is saying probably a little like in the heat of the moment, like, I'm good to go. Like, don't worry about me. I'm going to be, playing that game no matter what. But sometimes our bodies have different answers to those questions. Brendan Aronson, though, looked really good in place of Christian Pulisic. So there maybe isn't as much concern there, although you do want arguably your best player on the field in this game. Just what do you make of Christian Pulisic's performance up to this point, securing the round of 16 advancement for the U.S., and then what his role could be if it isn't on the field on Saturday?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've heard, we probably all heard it a bajillion times today from Jenny Taft, but she was reporting that the U.S. does have, just by happenstance, one of their PTs is a specialist in the pelvic area. So like if there is like a contusion or something there's going to be good treatment happening. So if they can get him back for a game, and they do have that a little bit extra of time for that game on Saturday compared to the teams that just qualified today, then that's going to be a benefit. But there is a possibility they aren't without him, or they are without him on that game on Saturday potentially, and we don't know. And I think that he did the right thing in that moment, saying he's going to be ready, because you can't make the other team think that one of your best players is not going to be playing.
Right.
But for Christian, talk about expectation. This guy has, from the moment he hit the scene, he has been the Wonder Boy and the Wonder Kid and Captain America and all of the sayings that have gone along with him. And I feel like sometimes it has overwhelmed him, and he's tried to do a little too much. And there are moments where I think he does a little too much on the ball and loses the ball in areas where it puts his teammates in bad spots. But I would say overall, through these 3 first games, I've been really, really impressed with his ability to be the outlet player, to link play for the team, to dribble 1v1 at players. But not only that, just his positioning in certain areas of the field inside to tempt a center back into that space and leave space and beyond for a teammate. His work ethic shows up in ways where he's not always getting the ball, but he's providing an option for someone else on his team. And that has really, I feel like, been evident in these games. And he's working his tail off. When he went out at halftime, he had already run 6 kilometers in the game. I think Tyler Adams at the end of the game ran 12 something.
Yeah, which is insane.
Tyler
Adams, by the way.
Yeah. But Christian Pulisic,
like if you're watching, by the way, like just for anyone who maybe is like just getting into soccer for the first time now, or maybe you're like really tuned in watching the US for the first time in a long time, watch Tyler Adams on the field. Just the ground that he covers, the way that he helps just like orchestrate so much of what the United States does, both defensively and offensively. I mean, he's been unbelievable.
He's like like a cattle dog. Like he'll just shepherd people over here. He's like, oh, you won the ball. I'm just going to bring you right here. And then we're going to win the ball back and we're going to take it. Like there are so many moments where I've been watching the US games at my friend Sarah's house. And She works with some of the players. I know her through soccer, so she has some tight connections with some of the players. And she's like, Jordan, stop it with Tyler Adams. I'm like, I can't. I love him. I love him so much. And I've said it so many times because the guy is everywhere, and he just has this, he can sniff out danger, win the ball back, and keep possession for the US. And yeah, he's been excellent. But for him to cover 12 kilometers in a full game, and the US had way less of the ball in the second half. Christian had already covered 6 kilometers when he went at halftime. And I was like, I kept saying, I'm like, my mind is blown. The guy is working so hard off the ball to be an asset defensively as well, which hasn't always been there because he is so good on the ball. Sometimes you want to let him float, but he's been willing to do whatever he's had to do for this team. So it will be difficult, but the United States, they're strong in that area of the field. They have Gio. They have Brendan Aronson. I think Aronson will get the start if Christian can't go. But Aronson gives you a lot of the same on the ball looks that Christian Pulisic can do on the dribble 1v1, tight connections at the top of the box. But his work rate is also relentless. So I think that they're in a good spot. If he can't go the full 90, he can also Aronson can create a lot of problems. So, but I think after that, Pulisic has made people are going to have a statue of him now for scoring that goal. That is going to be one of the goals and it was perfect. Christian Pulisic late run at the back post. He does this so many times, timing his run to perfection. But that is going to be a goal people are going to remember forever, like the Dempsey goal, to propel this team into the next round. It was so big time.
And it had to be him. It had to be Pulisic.
It had to be
just
him.
Adds to just the pageantry of it all. And it's so fun, for US fans just getting to experience that moment. Jordan, a couple more questions for you as the US now gets ready to take on the Netherlands. What are your early thoughts on this matchup and how it either favors or maybe doesn't favor the United States? They're currently the underdogs going into this one if you're a betting person, but what do you think?
Yeah, well, you might have to explain betting to me at another time because I do not get it at all. But I would say bring on the underdogs. We want to be the underdogs, and I like being the underdogs. And one of the things that I've found in this tournament, I think from the Netherlands, from Belgium, and from Denmark in particular, those 3 teams, they have, Denmark had a really good Euros last year. Belgium has De Bruyne. Like, what else do you need? Netherlands have some really good, solid players, Virgil van Dijk being one of them defensively. These 3 teams, I think, have underperformed and haven't been convincing in their play. And so I think that this is a good matchup for the United States, especially the quickness that they can provide through the middle of the field. I think that they can really do a good job of shifting the ball and overloading the side through McKinney, Musa, and Adams, and the ground that those 3 can cover, and their rotations that they make it difficult for the opponent to cover as much ground as they do. So I think that there's going to be opportunities for those 3 to really start to pull apart and pick apart this team. But the US has to be smart in the way that they get into the box, because when you have a player like Virgil van Dijk, you can't be playing crosses into the box. You can't be playing anything that he's just going to eat straight up. So can they be a little bit more clever about how they utilize, I would say, what we were kind of seeing from Serginho Dest, coming inside, pulling a center back out and either a shot from distance from him, because he can always score a worldie, or a quick combination at the top of the box. But that space, that half space at the top of the box on either side, is going to be really important for the United States to win those battles and see if they can start to play a little bit of chess, move players around so they can play through the lines. But overall, I'm kind of feeling this matchup. I think it's going to be a good game. I don't know if it ends in regulation time. Like, I think the United States can really put up a really good fight. And that makes me want to say one player that we haven't mentioned. And I'm so glad. I mean, there's a lot of players we haven't mentioned, but I am so glad we brought Tim Ream.
Yes. Could not agree more.
How has he not been on the team until now? I know he was with them and then he wasn't, and like,
yeah,
he's been excellent.
He's been phenomenal. And I think, something that originally a lot of people said was maybe a reason that he was named to this roster was, he's playing at Fulham. He's playing against a lot of, these players, especially like going into the group stage, that game against England. It's like, oh, Tim Ream's going to be, but he's been the best, he's been the guy who's locked up the center back spot. It's, now the rotating spot next to him with Carter Vickers and Walker Zimmerman. But defensively, this team has been phenomenal. I don't have like the stats in front of me right now, but the fact that they've only conceded 1 goal through the group stage, and it was a penalty. Matt Turner playing some just what has been working for this defense for the United States, because I will say that for me, I was a little surprised at how well they performed throughout these 3 games.
They look solid, and I think one of the things that is interesting with the changes in that back line, like, it's hard to hear each other when you're out on the field, and all the people in the stands are yelling and screaming. It's been loud in those stadiums. The way that they built them, I think, really holds the sound in. So yeah, communication is going to be big time. And I think Matt Turner is one of the best communicators from that goalkeeper position. And it helps him tremendously to see the ball when shots are taken. I feel like he's had a lot of really good looks so he can make the save. But I feel like as a unit, this team knows their roles. And I think that's why maybe a little bit why that first game against Wales was a little disappointing in the second half, is because I don't feel like they were getting enough pressure on the ball in that defensive and midfield line. And so it was just trickling down, and they couldn't get their transitions right and passing the player on right. But as the games progressed, I feel like that's gotten a lot better. One of the biggest things I feel like has worked for this team is they haven't allowed teams to really build through the middle of the field. It's been Ream or Zimmerman or Carter Vickers stepping on the center forwards and winning the ball back high on the field for the United States and keeping the pressure on. That's why they've been so good in the first half. So I really do think that the mentality of the unit of this squad has been just so locked in. And then you're seeing the connection between Robinson and Ream is so it's just really built in from what they do in club soccer. I feel like the 2 center backs, no matter if it's Zimmerman, who hasn't been great, but I don't think he's been as bad as everybody has made him out to be. He makes one mistake in the first game. Yeah. It's a penalty. I really think he's done all right, but I do understand the change to Carter Vickers when it comes to, can he play through the lines a little bit better? Because Zimmerman hasn't been stellar in possession, but also he's been good at what he's been good at. And he came in and helped shore up the game in this last game. So I think understanding their roles has been really important, because whatever the game plan has been for in every game, you can see that they're out there knowing how, even if they can't communicate with each other, can't hear each other to pass a player on, like their awareness, their ability to check their shoulder, they're constantly scanning. And this team is really locked in when it comes to who they want to be defensively, which is a very Greg Berhalter style squad. He was like that with Columbus. Now he's like that with the U.S. team. And I mean, it's not a surprise, right, from a defender that they would be defensive minded and really locked in on that side.
Yes, no, of course. And it's, I think, just been really awesome to watch, because as we talk about knockout rounds, I mean, having a solid defense is a great way if you want and get through really tough games. 2 more for you, Jordan. The number 9. The number 9. What is the answer there? What have you made of that position, all of the talk around it, and what you've seen so far in this World Cup, minus Jesus Ferreira, who has not made it onto the field, maybe a little bit surprisingly?
Yeah, that has surprised me, to be honest. Just because he is so good at coming into the midfield and playing a false 9 and allowing then the wingers to get in beyond. And when you have a winger like Christian Pulisic, can be very helpful. So I'm surprised that Jesus Ferreira hasn't played. But with that being said, I haven't had. Okay, I know the center forwards, you want them to be scoring goals. That's the number one part of all of this. But I feel like Josh Sargent was excellent in this last game against Iran. I really liked what he had to do. His ability to hold the ball up, to put his body on the line, to connect the play, and to understand when he could get into a passing lane at the right time. I thought his movement was excellent, and I thought Sargent had a really, really good game this last game. Now, I don't know what happened to him. It didn't look awesome in that replay when he landed on his leg, kind of on top of the ball. It looked like it was a hyperextension. I have an issue watching those things. Too many knee surgeries will do that to you. But I hope that he's all right. And if he's all right, I would go with him, because I really do think, especially against Netherlands back line, who can be aggressive to go step. Can he hold his body in front, hold the ball up, draw fouls? But then his quick movement in and around those players might be beneficial, because I'm not saying they're slow, but they're big bodies. And can he use a little bit of his agility? So I think he's the answer for me right now. But I also can see Haji Wright starting in this game just because of his stature and how that would go up against these center backs.
Yeah, definitely something that I think we're all eager to see is what this lineup looks like on Saturday. But
each game we're like, okay,
I know
which some teams don't even have that. I think there are a couple of positions where you don't really know who is gonna start. So
yeah, there's the guys who are definitely like permanent marker on, the team sheet in the lineup, but then there are always the tweaks. But you can see that as a pro and a negative too, because the team's got depth on one hand and maybe some question marks at certain positions. But my last question for you, for anybody watching this game or watching the U.S., hopefully beyond just this game, but in this game, what is something, putting your analyst hat on, your former player hat on, that you're looking for from the U.S. in this game? Something that you think is going to be a difference maker, or just some part of the game that you're really intrigued in this matchup to see?
Ooh. I think we've seen glimpses of this, and I think Tyler Adams has kind of stolen the spotlight in the middle of the field. But I think that there are two players that I think that this could be a really big game for. One is Yunus Musah. I think Yunus Musah has now finally, we're starting to see him do some of the things where he's a very confident player, and he pulls things off and makes them look easy. Like, he did a double scissors, took the ball away with his right foot, and then crossed the field with his next touch. Those are the types of things that I think, once he finally feels comfortable in a situation, which, again, he hasn't played in a World Cup before. He's 20 years old, just turned 20 years old. I think he's found his footing and his understanding that, all right, I know the pace and I know how I can play in these games. I think he's going to have a massive game, and I think he's going to be really impactful for the United States when it comes to finding the pockets in between the lines and being that connecting piece. So look for Yunus Musah and what he can do centrally. And then the kid from the Netherlands playing for the United States, Serginho Dest. I think this is going to be really interesting, because he's said there's been some comments that, he chose the United States because the United States was there from him when things weren't going great. And I think he is a swaggy guy. He is a character, I have heard. And I think he is going to bottle all of that up and be able to unleash that against players he probably knows very well from his youth days. And so I think this could be a really big game for him, and a big opportunity for him to not necessarily score the goal, although I wouldn't be shocked if he did score a goal from distance, but to continue to impact the game as he did in the last game where he got an assist. So those are the two players that I'm like, I don't know. I love it. No, I love a lot of players on this team. It's hard to pick a few, but I'm going to say Yunus Musah on this one.
Yeah, I love it. I'm also I think Serginho Dest has really grown on me. I was maybe a little critical after the first game against Wales, but I think the way that he's like grown throughout this group stage and has just continued to like just make his impact and make his mark. I feel like the US have also missed like some of those bombs from outside the box or from distance have like gone way over. I hope that like that's another lesson that they've picked up from the group stage is like, let's get those down a little bit because we're like we got the right idea. We just need to execute here a little bit.
The one other thing I would like to see in this tournament, and it doesn't have to necessarily be next game because if they win, they get another game, is I want to see a Weston McKennie like Harry Potter, his celebration. I just love that. And I feel like that would be amazing to see on a World Cup stage. So
we've really been deprived of like some good goal celebrations.
I know.
Melissa gets hurt, so we don't really get much there.
I know.
And then, you get one goal in the other, between the other.
Tim Weah's knee slide was pretty
that was
sick.
Pretty sweet. I love Tim Weah. You're right though. This team is just so exciting. So many, just remarkable talents and I think incredibly mature, poised, confident players. And sometimes it's those groups that go on to make a run. And that's the exciting part of, these kinds of tournaments. So
and Matt Turner is going to have a big game and he probably will because
Matt Turner's cool.
That's who he is.
He is. He's just, it's just been so fun. The coverage has been great. And I think like for me, this is like the first World Cup that I followed the US in a long time where like social media is what it is now. So I feel like we've gotten to see a lot of like, just like even more kind of like behind the scenes and stuff like that, which has been really fun. So it's just been awesome. But Jordan, you're so awesome. Fun. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge and talking some USMNT with me on the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, you guys are having fun in Kansas City. Are you doing a watch party again for this next one?
You bet we are. I'm actually going to be in a wedding Friday night, and my husband was like, "You've got to be there." I'm like, I'm flying Friday night from this wedding in St. Louis back to Kansas City so that I can wake up because gates open at 7:30 a.m. It's going to be, an early kick. So
oh my gosh,
we are going to be there right now.
Well, let's pray for flights on time for Aly. But I've seen Matt Besler like chug beers. I saw Nate didn't have his shirt on in one of the pictures I saw. There's stuff happening there that I have questions about.
There's some
you also love to see. So I don't know what those fans are in store for on Saturday morning, but I can imagine it's going to be mayhem.
It is. So if you are listening and you're in Kansas City and you're like, how do I become a part of that? How do I see Matt Besler possibly chug a beer? Maybe Katie take his shirt off. Men dressed as the founding fathers. Well, go online at sportingkc.com and you can get your tickets. They're free. You just need one to get entry into the area, which I don't know what happens to everybody. I think everyone just gets a little weird once they walk into this crowd, but
you gotta get weird.
It's a lot of fun. We'll all be getting weird on Saturdays. The U.S. take on Netherlands, round of 16. Let's go, Jordan. Enjoy the rest of your week and also the match on Saturday.
Yes,
hopefully,
thank
you.
We might be getting the same amount of
vibes.
Sleep. We might be getting the same amount of sleep that night before.
Yes. No, it's going to be a lot of people up with nerves, but it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
so thank you for taking so much time. I did not mean to keep you this long, but it was great talking to you.
So
thanks for having me. We'll talk soon.